Hey guys, welcome back to the Slipstream where we discuss all things motorsport and racing. I'm Ash.
I'm Trey.
I'm Sachet.
And today we're going over the Formula 2 Race League. Okay, so first it was originally named the GP2, where it was first founded in 2005 and supplied with Dallara chassis, mechanochrome engines, and 18 by 12 front and 18 by 13.7 rear Pirelli tires. Pirelli tires are the tires of every Formula racing format. 2 drivers per 13 teams. And the only thing that has changed since then is the size of the car, to match current regulations and the number of drivers and teams on the grid. So we're going to go through the comparison between Formula 1 and Formula 2. Okay, so Formula 1, the max weight that's allowed for a turbo hybrid era is 798 kilograms, and the max weight for F2 second-gen cars are 755 kilograms. So the top speed in F1 is 1,000 HP, which is 230 miles per hour. The top speed in F2 is 620 horsepower, which is 195 miles per hour. The value of an F1 car with all the components included is $13 million. The value of an F2 car with all the components is about $500,000. And after the branding folded in 2016, the series was renamed the FIA Formula 2 in 2018 and now races under 11 teams. So we have the Invicta Racing, the Campos Racing, MP Motorsport High-Tech TGR, Prima Racing, DAMS, Dams Lucas Oil, ART Art Grand Prix, Rodin Motorsport, AIX Racing, Trident, and Van Amersfoort Racing. So each team consists of 2 drivers for the full season, but no test drivers, unlike in Formula 1. And across the years, Art and Prema have been the dominant forces in terms of constructors, with Dams following them close in some seasons and Invicta coming close this season with its lineup of Leonardo Fornaroli and Roman Stanek.
Leonardo Fornaroli and Roman Stanek. And there are typically 14 rounds in an F2 season. This is kind of how the framework sets up for the season. There is a sprint race and a feature race each weekend, and the sprint race offers points for those who finish in the top 8, with 10 points being for the winner, and the feature race offers points for those who finish in the top 10, 25 being the highest amount of points that a winner can score, kind of like in Formula 1. And the only difference is that the pole sitter on the Friday qualifying classification gets 2
additional points in the WDC. Yep.
And a lot like Formula E in a way. And the penalties work relatively similar as it does in Formula 1, but there is a lower concentration of 10-second time penalties handed out in a single race, much less throughout the season, since it is a junior league and it's not as strict. Because obviously with penalties in the big leagues, you can get fined, you can get banned, you can get kicked, you can get traded, switched, just about everything you can possibly imagine.
Basically anything and everything.
Yeah, and this all really comes down to the money situation. So the drivers are not paid in Formula 2. However, they do have all of their services covered, including healthcare, damages, sponsors, travel, and food and drinks. And unless the FIA is not able to monetarily fund to these demands, they cover it throughout all of the season from start to finish. But there are 2 main controversies that have revolved around the Formula 2 series, and they mainly revolve around safety and, ironically enough, budgeting.
Yep.
So the controversy of safety came after Antoine Hubert's very, very violent, kind of almost like freak accident at the 2019 Belgium Grand Prix, where it was, I believe, lap 2 or lap 3 of the feature race at Spa-Francorchamps, and he was approaching Redalion and Eau Rouge, just at the top of the hill in Redalion and going into the main straightaway, when he spun out of control and ended up in the middle of the track nearly at a stop. But Juan Manuel Correa, one of the other drivers in the Sauber Academy, came through and pretty much split his car in half. This pretty much knocked out Antoine Hubert pretty much into a comatose state. And unfortunately, he did not survive by the time he arrived at the hospital, and he died at the age of 22, I believe.
Yeah.
And Juan Manuel Correa, thankfully enough, has taken a very humble approach, and he has recovered well, and he is back racing in Formula 2. But it really pinpoints the question, how seriously are we taking safety in the junior leagues, and at that, in women's leagues, comparison to strictly men's and strictly big league sports.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, there was another controversy revolving around post-pandemic cuts and how the FIA manages their monetary funds, because we all know that a lot like, some of the other administrative bodies that head the big league sports, including FIFA and soccer and the NFL, it's going to be corrupt in one way or another, and there's going to be some pretty sneaky spending going around. But there was some controversy revolving around how they disperse their funds in a post-pandemic world. Luckily enough, it seems like they've been doing pretty well with this, but again, it doesn't help that they don't pay their drivers.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
So, Sachit, do you want to go into what happened in the first half of the 2025 Formula 2 season? Because we have a lot of trouble in our hands.
It's a penalty train wreck in the current F2 season.
What happened was exactly half the drivers on the grid had been awarded a post-race penalty in some way during at least one race, with disqualifications occurring for an unregulated car, unsportsmanlike conduct in the conducting laps, etc.,
laps, so on and so forth.
So on and so forth. And then we also had nearly 90% of the entire grid having gotten a penalty of some sort, including current championship leader Leonardo Fornaroli and early contender Alex
Dwayne.
Dunn. It's Dunn.
Yeah,
I don't know why it's autocorrecting to Dwayne, some kind of thing with the keyboard. Yeah. But, go ahead.
The Hungarian feature race on August 3rd also saw the most penal race in sports history, with over 30 seconds worth of penalties being awarded to 7 drivers, both classified finishers and DNFs, and not to mention the scandals. Oh my God, the cheating scandals.
Yeah.
They've also been pretty prevalent. Have been far too present force in this current season of F2, with more present race disqualifications being handed out this season for unregulated cars than any other season in history. Like, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, so let's break down the specific types of penalties that have been handed out across these races. So, first and foremost, this is probably one of the most unforgettable incidents in Formula 1 history. Alex Dunn started on the front row alongside his, at that time, rival or championship contending rival, Victor Martins, who is representing France. Alex Dunn represents Ireland. So it seemed like it was going to be a pretty clean and a pretty competitive race. And, lights go out. Everyone gets on the throttle. Everyone's trying to fight for a position before they get into the first turn and pass Sandevot. But Alex Dunn locked up slightly, and he shunted the right rear tire of Victor Martins.
Yep, and it caused a pile-up
collision that involved pretty much every single driver except for maybe like 4 or 5 who were able to escape pretty much unscathed. I think one of them may have, chipped his front end plate a little bit, but obviously that called for a red flag.
Oh yes, absolutely. That red flag is like the minimum that should be called. But also, this crash was one of the biggest in F2, and it's still talked about to this day. Like, it's one of the biggest crashes in F2, and that's where
it's absolutely nuts. And I think it kind of caused a snowball effect as to how people now view Alex Dunn as a moral on his moral ground and in his ethics and how he presents himself on track as a driver, because we know that he's also gotten involved in a couple of incidents, some of them pretty ugly, some of them completely unwarranted,
which I find controversial, as I really like Alex Dunn as a driver. But yeah, there was a big punishment for that Spanish sprint race. It was a 10-place grid drop. And the consensus was that it was unfair and that they should have received an immediate race ban.
Yeah, it's kind of like the Belgium Spa 2012 situation. You remember the race start where it was kind of a mixed grid, but then again, the whole season was a mixed grid. Everybody was competitive. All teams were competitive. But Romain Grosjean started, I believe it was the 4th row.
Yes.
And he made the pretty bonehead decision to try and pass Lewis Hamilton around the outside, but tailgate him at the same time. That caused a pile-up collision. And I don't know how that didn't result in a red flag, but he received a 1 race ban for that.
Yes. And so back to the Formula 2 race, Sebastian Montoya was given a 5-second penalty that dropped him from the top 5 to P11. That is an incredible grid drop, and it was at the Spanish feature race for colliding with Gabriel Mini. And the consensus for this one was fair, as Montoya tried to pass him off track.
Yeah, a lot of people were watching the replays and the recordings and the tapes of these things. They were saying, Mini should have provided a little bit more space. You can't really provide as much space when you're trying to take the racing line specifically.
Yeah, so it's not in Formula racing, it's not always the fault of the other driver trying to give the space, and sometimes it's also kind of the fault of like pushing another driver off track, and it all depends on the situation. But in this one, Mini was definitely not at fault.
He was definitely not at fault. We can't apportion blame to him. But we can apportion blame to him as well as John Bennett. Is that both of them shared 3 5-second time penalties, 2 to Bennett, 1 to Mini, for forcing their rivals off track to gain a lasting advantage at the Hungarian feature race.
Yeah, so as I was mentioning before, forcing other drivers off track does cause it means that you're gaining an advantage by trying to force your other rivals off the track, or trying to pass them off track. And so that results in time penalties, and sometimes it's 10, sometimes it's 5. So this one was 3 5-second ones. So that was kind of heavy. Arvin Lindblad, who is half Indian and half
British,
and
I think part Swedish
and part
as well.
Swedish. And Luke Browning also got a 5-second time penalty for leaving the track and gaining an advantage in the same sector.
Hungary.
And so again, that was fair. Even though the braking point was less sensitive in these cars since they only go to the 6th gear. But it's still crucial to know how to brake before the 100-meter mark.
And there are a couple of other punishments that I've also mentioned in the research doc as well. 5-second time penalty and 1 penalty point to Keon Shields for, I don't know how you say this name. These names are very,
very
weird, very
to butcher,
it's very easy to butcher Formula 2 drivers' names. But he exceeded the minimum delta pace across 2 back-to-back sectors under safety car conditions at, want to take a guess?
Hungary.
Exactly. And this is why it gave not just the Formula 2 body, but also the Formula 2 drivers kind of an iffy reputation with how they ethically present themselves on the track.
Oh, yes. And so along with these penalties, there have been plenty of post-race disqualifications. So first we have Paraguay's Joshua Dirksen, who was disqualified from 3rd, the Bahrain feature race, for his diffuser being too short.
So it was below the specified, I believe, minimum height that it should be from the under tray or the belly pan.
And so he's disqualified from
he was
3rd
disqualified
place.
from 3rd. Dino Bogdanovic.
Podium position.
Yes, Dino Bogdanovic was promoted to his position afterwards.
And as much as I do love Dino, I just...
I
feel like Dino could have fought for that position instead of giving it.
He's definitely the George Russell of modern day Formula 2. He always finds himself getting lucky in situations and keeping his head down.
And see, this is why I also love Dino and George Russell, because I could argue that it is partly luck, but also it's partly talent. And Dino is a great driver. And I was actually quite surprised when he wasn't promoted to Formula 1. And I do agree with the current choices for the rookie grid. Isaac Hadjar, Behrman, Antonelli, Bortoletto. And I'm very happy with those choices because they have performed quite consistently. But again, I would have liked to see Dino and Alex Dunn on the grid this year.
Yeah, I think my only theory is that Théo Pourchaire has been heavily invested in ever since he joined the Sauber Academy and promoted himself to the Ferrari Academy. Again, Sauber and Ferrari have some pretty close ties together, so I feel like they want to focus on their next golden boy. But then again, why not make that Arthur Leclerc? He's been pretty solid.
He has been performing pretty consistently over these past couple years, so I think he should be promoted.
Yeah, he could be, and it could be, Monegas brothers duo. They could.
Yes, Monegas.
I'm not saying that they could immaculate themselves like the Marquez brothers have in MotoGP, but they could come pretty close and stand out in their own right as a duo.
Oh yeah, a bunch of Ferrari fans would love to see a little sibling duo. But yeah, going back to the disqualifications, Ireland's Alex Dunn was promoted to second over Arvin Lindblad after a 10-second time penalty for a collision course, but promptly disqualified for plankwear infringement. Again, this is nothing that the drivers can control, but the amount of penalties that has been given for these and disqualifications are terrible because you can't even gain points in this situation. And I think that's just very heavy on the drivers. Another driver, Richard Verschoor, he was a self-cementing legend and senior driver in F2 and was promoted to the victory of that race over Alex Dunn.
And then finally, Britain's Arvid Lindblad was disqualified from his first win of the season at the Belgian feature race for insufficient tire. How do you mess up, out of all things, the tire wear?
That's the main part of the car, and that goes in part.
You just can't.
And that is in part to the engineers, and I think that's terrible for Arvin Lindblad because I genuinely love him as a driver as well. Speaking about Arvin Lindblad, he is a rising test driver, I believe.
Yeah, he's a rising test driver. He is only 18 years old as of August 8th. He was born in 2007 in Britain, and he has recently been promoted to V-Carb in Formula 1. So, Arvid, if you're watching this, congratulations, man.
Yep, so V-Carb test driver, and I'm really excited to see him in the Formula 1 format. After watching a lot of his races in Formula 2, it's really, really quite exciting.
Humble guy, amazing spirit, and he's got a spark in his ass.
So the most recent case of post-quali disqualification was for Victor Martins, disqualified for crashing into another outlap racer in either Q1 or Q2 and bringing out the red flag. So this was deemed to be more than an unsafe re-entry for the French junior driver.
Yeah, and I believe if you've seen the Formula 2 Instagram page, you will see how he was on his outlap along with a lot of the other drivers. And he went into the runoff area just at the beginning of Sector 3 before, one of the fastest chicanes on the Formula 1 calendar. And then he tried rejoining, but I believe he just slammed himself into one of the MP Motorsport cars.
Yes. Yeah.
And a bunch of debris spilled everywhere, brought out the red flag, had to stop the session, and I think he expressed a lot of remorse. And obviously, when he was in the moment, probably just thinking about, getting the best result possible. But it's okay. We all have that sort of adrenaline rush when we want to get something that we need.
Yeah, I agree. The one thing about Victor Martins is that as good of a driver he is inconsistent in my opinion, and the pressure really gets to him, which is why you see him still stuck in kind of the Formula 2 format.
Yeah, I mean, we said the same thing only a couple of years back about Isaac Hadjar, fellow Frenchman.
That is true.
I mean, he has been able to not only surpass our expectations, but pretty much surpass his own. Because if you see him after a good result in qualifying or in the race, he even looks surprised for himself. But I think that's just kind of like his resting face.
Yeah, I think he has pure talent, and honestly, there was one crucial moment for Isaac Hadjar in last year's Monaco race in F2, where he had an incredible reaction time to another driver. So another driver had, I think, an engine failure or something, and the driver was stopped on track. and Isaac Hadjar was coming around a blind corner.
He was coming through the tunnel of the casino.
It was a tunnel
and it was
of a
relatively
casino,
dark.
and it was dark, and it was a blind corner. He couldn't see out as he was coming out of the turn. And these cars, as we said before, are going at 150 up to 200 miles per hour. And so Isaac Hadjar was going at that speed and rounding that turn to gain maximum speed as you're exiting the turn. So Isaac Hadjar, as soon as he took that turn, he saw that the car had stalled and immediately skipped around it.
Around him. He avoided him by like 4 inches.
Oh yeah, it was 4 inches.
Yeah.
Reaction time was like less than half a second or something like that, and it was just incredible to be going at that speed. And I think that moment was really what solidified him as a driver for VCAR, but also as
I know what you're trying to say, but I know what you're trying to say. But going back to the post-race disqualifications, it should be mentioned that every single driver that was disqualified post-race finished on the podium. So not only is it unsatisfactory in terms of the teams wasting their resources like that, but they're wasting these guys' talents.
Oh yes, absolutely. And this goes back to the budgeting thing where the money is not really spent smartly. It's not it's not spent intelligently. And so little mistakes like the tire wear and the chassis and the plank wear and everything is something that should be addressed in Formula One and should not be costing their drivers these essential points and these crucial podiums.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't think it's really much of a fault of the team, as unfortunately you have to cut corners sometimes in racing or in any corporate scene in the real world.
True.
Because otherwise, how else are you going to be able to get what you want, and how else are you going to be able to keep your job, honestly? Because this pretty much, Formula 2, even though it's unpaid, it's pretty much a job for these guys.
Oh, yeah.
They need to make sure that they stay consistent, prove themselves the best, have the proper moral, ethical, and fundamental backing from their teams. And if they don't get it, then they're pretty much out. And it's really unfortunate because there are only 20 spots in the league for Formula One and only a few hundred spots in some of the most popular leagues across the world, including IMSA, Formula E, and NASCAR. I would say it does feed into NASCAR very indirectly. So there are a couple more penalties that we actually forgot to
address.
Yeah, so it says, while several penalties were applied across the sessions, not all investigations led to sanctions. In 3 separate cases, the stewards elected to take no further action following extensive analysis. And of course, again, when it comes to extensive analysis, whenever you're doing it on the opening lap, it doesn't warrant for a penalty as much as it would for mid-race or in the pit lane. But just thinking about how they're electing to take no further action in as many as 3 of these cases just shows how messy this Hungarian future race was. And honestly, I want to ask you guys a question.
Mm-hmm.
Who do you think is the most affected by a season as penal as this? The drivers, the constructors, or the administrative bodies? And if you had to list them out in order in who's the most affected, how would you list it out?
Definitely the teams first, I would say, then the drivers, then the administrative bodies. If we were going by drivers themselves individually, I would say Victor Martins has been victim to this.
That's an understatement. And then what would you say about administrative bodies or teams next? What would you say about them?
Administrative bodies, I would say that you have multiple drivers for your team. And I mean, you have other drivers to perform. So if one driver disqualifies, you have another to back it up. So it's not that big of an impact on those administrative bodies as it would for an individual driver. That's pretty devastating, or as it would for the team. That's a loss in points.
Yeah, I do feel like a lot of people unnecessarily call these penalties unfair, and I think that's because they still view these junior drivers, emphasis on junior, as kids, they're trying their best. They want to do what they can in order to get to the big leagues and earn a spot in some legendary team. But at the same time, they're not really kids. They kind of know what they're doing, and they have to have some level of self-awareness. And I feel like the FIA has taken both of these elements into account and been penalizing them pretty fairly. But that's just my personal opinion.
Okay.
I try to be, I definitely try to be as empathetic with these drivers as possible, but if I see that something is wrong, I will call it out. I won't jump on the hate bandwagon immediately, but I will make sure that it is called out.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah. What about you, Satya? Who do you think is the most affected by these, by the slew of penalties?
Yeah, so going in order, I think the teams first and foremost, because again, like what you said earlier with, these guys are out on the track giving it their all, and to just see them just get these sort of penalties out of the blue, especially if they get the podium positions, they are definitely the most effective. And I think drivers would definitely be a subcategory to that, because, in teams you have drivers, and that's basically how this sport kind of functions, drivers in your teams. So they definitely fall victim, and I would definitely agree with what you said earlier, Ash, about, Victor being, pardon the pun, being the victim to the most penalties. And of course, the administration, I'd say, although it is at the bottom of the list for me, I'd say they suffer a great deal too, because you're putting on this race and you're just giving podium winners penalties. That's a severe loss for you, because people paid to see podium positions, and these guys earned their positions, and see you not reward them is just poor judgment on your end.
Yeah, I think that even though they are podium finishers, if you're making a mistake in the race, you deserve that penalty anyway. And what's a race without a few exciting penalties for the podium finishers,
True.
right?
Yeah, of course.
But again, as Trey said, I think the FIA has been pretty fair in the Formula 2 format. Formula 1 is a whole different ball game. I think the penalties given out by the FIA are just way out of left field in Formula 1. But I do agree. I agree with the penalties in Formula 2.
Well, two things to say about that. One, I don't feel like there has been enough of a big name on track controversy to warrant a stricter penalty system, which I think that is something that the FIA has done very well with Formula 2. They've been paying attention to the fact that they're kids, they're still learning, they're still growing. So
still maturing, yeah.
Even if it were a Verstappen Hamilton situation, they still take into account the fact that they still have a lot to learn and develop as the years go on and as they continue with their racing career.
Oh, yes, I agree.
But unfortunately, I feel like because they also view them as kids, they also have to baby them and, give them a few too many consequences, which makes for a lot of action in Formula 2 just in the wrong places.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I just think that when those Formula 2 rookies get promoted to Formula 1, the most amount of penalties aren't really given to the rookies. They are more responsible for tire touches and crashes, I feel. So that's an interesting opinion.
It's very paradoxical
the
way that they treat these
agree.
up and coming drivers.
So the FIA giving penalties to these rookie drivers is not a common occurrence in Formula 1, I would feel, because if you look, just last week, they were giving 2 weeks ago, they were giving a unfair penalty to Sainz for that, I think, touch or collision with Liam Lawson.
Right.
And so you see these types of unfair penalties with the experienced drivers, and I feel like you see more crashes and obvious penalties for the rookies.
I will say I don't think that they've been doing enough to try and stop Alex Dunn. Don't get me wrong. He's a great driver. He's been representing his country very, very well. He could be the first Irish driver, and I think it's been, a couple of decades? I think it's been since the 1980s or 1990s since Ireland has seen one of its drivers participate full-time in Formula 1. But obviously, in regards to the Monaco feature race incident and a couple of other incidents where he has literally done his rivals dirty, I feel like he's been given the British treatment. If you don't know what the British treatment is, it's basically
Yeah.
a bit of a controversial way of treating British drivers, or for that matter, Canadian, Australian, and American drivers, with a little bit less of a punishing mindset in comparison to other drivers from other countries.
Yeah, I do agree with that. The penalties are quite. I mean, they're different.
It's very different in a league of sport, again, where, people are still learning and people still have a long way to go, but that's neither here or there. All I'm saying is that I'm hoping for a much cleaner season next season, maybe for the junior drivers that come up from Formula 3, because if you look at Formula 3, a lot of them seem very deserving of a seat in Formula 2, including that one Thai driver, Tassanapol. I forgot his last name, but he ended off the season on a complete and total high, sweeping away the competition in Italy, and I think the previous race before in, what was it, Hungary or was it Britain? I forgot what the Formula 3 schedule was
I think
like.
it was Britain.
Yeah, something like that. But again, it's neither here or there. We just hope for a much cleaner season, a little bit less controversy. Don't push drivers off the track.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's for sure.
And I think that about does it for this episode of Formula 2. Thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure you tune in with us next time. And once again, catch us on Spotify, watch us here on YouTube, and make sure you follow our Instagram for more notifications and announcements. And I'm Trey.
I'm Ash.
I'm Sachet.
We'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.
Peace.
Bye-bye.